The hotel lobby was grand, filled with elegant chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests moved around, chatting and checking in, but none of them paid attention to the young boy standing near the front desk. He had just walked in, wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans, his eyes scanning the space with curiosity. But before he could take another step, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" The receptionist, a tall woman with neatly tied blonde hair, frowned as she looked him up and down. Her tone was cold, filled with suspicion. The boy hesitated, confused by her reaction. "I was just." "I don't think you belong here," she interrupted, her voice louder this time. Nearby guests turned their heads. Some whispered, others just watched. The boy felt his face heat up, but he stood his ground. The receptionist crossed her arms. "If you don't leave right now, I'll call security." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a calm but firm voice, he spoke words that made the entire room go silent. "You might want to think twice about that. My dad owns this hotel." The receptionist blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Then she let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, really? Your dad owns this hotel?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's a good one." She glanced around, expecting others to join in her amusement, but some of the guests looked uneasy. The boy didn't flinch. He simply held her gaze, his expression steady. "Yes," he said calmly, "and I was just here to see him." The receptionist scoffed. "Nice try, but I don't have time for games." She reached for the phone on the counter. "If you don't leave right now, I'll have security escort you out." A few guests exchanged glances, sensing something wasn't right. A man in a suit, standing near the lounge area, furrowed his brow as he watched this scene unfold. The tension in the lobby grew heavier. Still, the boy remained composed. "Go ahead," he said, nodding toward the phone. "But when you call security, make sure to tell them you just kicked out the owner's son." The receptionist hesitated, her fingers hovering over the dial pad. Something about the boy's confidence made her uneasy. The lobby fell silent, all eyes on her next move. The receptionist's grip tightened on the phone, but she hesitated. The boy didn't look nervous or like he was bluffing. There was something unsettling about the way he stood his ground. Guests nearby whispered amongst themselves, sensing the growing tension. A hotel manager, a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair, noticed the commotion and walked over with a questioning look. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing between the receptionist and the boy. The receptionist forced a smile, trying to maintain control of the situation. "This kid was loitering in the lobby. I was just about to have security escort him out." The boy finally sighed, clearly growing tired of the back and forth. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his phone, tapping a few times before holding it up. The screen displayed a picture of him standing beside a distinguished-looking man in a suit, smiling in front of the hotel entrance. The caption read, "Asterisk grand opening. Proud to build this legacy for my son asterisk." The manager's face paled as he recognized the man immediately. He took a slow step back, suddenly uneasy. The receptionist frowned. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. The boy met her gaze, his tone firm but controlled. "It's proof," he said. "Now do you still want to call security?" The receptionist's confidence wavered as she stared at the photo. Her fingers twitched slightly, still hovering over the phone, but she didn't dial. The boy didn't need to say another word. His expression, his calm demeanor, and the undeniable proof in his hand spoke volumes. The guests nearby leaned in, sensing that something major was about to unfold. The hotel manager swallowed hard, his eyes darting between the boy and the receptionist. His voice, once firm, now held a nervous edge. "You should have told us sooner," he said, trying to mask his discomfort. The boy arched an eyebrow. "Should I have?" His voice remained steady, but there was a weight behind his words. "Would you have believed me?" The receptionist opened her mouth, but no words came out. A few staff members had gathered near the lobby desk, their faces tense. They had all seen how quickly she dismissed him, how she refused to even consider his words. Now, with the truth hanging in the air, the power in the room had shifted. Just then, the grand entrance doors swung open. A tall man in an expensive suit walked in, his presence commanding instant attention. His sharp eyes scanned the room, locking onto the boy. The entire lobby fell silent. The tall man's gaze swept across the silent lobby before settling on the boy. His expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet authority in the way he carried himself. The receptionist, now visibly tense, straightened her posture, forcing a polite smile. She had seen this man before. His portrait hung in the executive office upstairs. "Mr. Carter," the manager greeted nervously, stepping forward. "We weren't expecting you." Mr. Carter ignored him, walking straight to the boy. Without hesitation, he placed a firm yet reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with something unshakable. The receptionist swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. She knew she had messed up, but she still tried to salvage the situation. "Sir, She started, but before she could finish, another voice cut through the tension. A sharply dressed woman emerged from the elevator, holding a tablet. She wore a sleek business suit, and her sharp eyes darted toward the scene unfolding at the front desk. The staff immediately recognized her. She was the regional director, someone who rarely made surprise visits. She glanced at the receptionist, then at Mr. Carter and his son. Then in a tone that sent a chill through the air, she asked, "Can someone explain to me why the owner's son was nearly thrown out of his own hotel?" The room fell into a stunned silence. The receptionist's face turned pale as the weight of her actions fully sank in. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Mr. Carter turned to his son, giving him a reassuring nod before facing the regional director. "I believe my son was just looking around," he said calmly, his voice steady but firm. But instead of being treated like any other guest, he was humiliated and turned away. The regional director's expression darkened. She turned sharply to the receptionist. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice icy. The receptionist stammered, desperately searching for an excuse. "Hi, I didn't know who he was," she mumbled, her hands shaking. The regional director shook her head. "It shouldn't matter who he is. Every guest deserves respect." She glanced at Mr. Carter. "What would you like to do?" Mr. Carter studied the receptionist for a long moment before speaking. "I don't believe someone who judges guests based on appearance should represent this hotel," he said, his tone final. Tears welled up in the receptionist's eyes as security was quietly called. But just as she turned to leave, Mr. Carter's son spoke up. "Wait," he said, his voice clear. Everyone looked at him. "I want her to apologize, not just to me, but to every guest she's ever mistreated." The room remained silent for a beat before the regional director nodded. "You heard him." The receptionist, now visibly shaken, turned to the boy. She took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry. I judged you without knowing you, and that was wrong." The boy gave a small nod, accepting her apology, but the lesson was clear. Kindness and respect should never be based on assumptions. The receptionist lowered her head, the weight of her actions fully settling in. She knew this moment would stay with her forever. Mr. Carter watched her for a moment before turning to his son. "You handled that well," he said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The boy gave a small smile, feeling a sense of pride, not because of power or authority, but because he had stood up for himself with grace. The regional director took charge, assuring Mr. Carter that the hotel staff would undergo additional training to ensure no guest was ever treated unfairly again. Other employees, who had witnessed everything, exchanged looks of quiet understanding. Some of them had seen similar behavior before, but never had the courage to speak up. Now they knew things had to change. As Mr. Carter and his son walked through the lobby, guests and employees who had overheard the incident nodded respectfully. The young boy had unknowingly set an example, one that proved kindness, fairness, and respect should be at the core of every interaction. Before stepping out, he glanced back one last time, not with anger, but with hope that this moment had made a difference. And in many ways, it had.